The cafeteria at Westbridge Academy was louder than usual that Monday afternoon. Metal trays slammed against tables. Students shouted over one another. Someone in the corner blasted music from a phone speaker until a teacher yelled for silence. And in the middle of all that noise, one quiet woman stepped into the cafeteria carrying a plain white lunch plate. Nobody paid attention to her at first. She wore a simple gray cardigan. No makeup, no jewelry, except a silver watch on her wrist. Most students assumed she was another substitute teacher. A few thought she was a parent visiting the school, but she wasn't. She was a new headmistress. And nobody knew yet, especially not Mason Reed. Mason was the kind of student everyone noticed the second he walked into a room. Tall, broad shoulders, expensive sneakers, a cocky grin that never seemed to disappear. Teachers hated dealing with him. Students feared him, and his group of friends followed him around like bodyguards. He ruled Westbridge Academy through intimidation, not because he was the smartest, not because he was athletic, but because nobody ever challenged him. If Mason insulted someone, the cafeteria laughed. If Mason shoved someone, teachers looked the other way. And if Mason decided your life should become miserable, it usually did. That afternoon, Mason sat at the center table with his crew, 3 boys, 2 girls, all laughing loudly while filming short videos for social media. "Bro, post that one," Tyler said while nearly choking on fries. "The one where Coach Daniel slipped." Mason smirked. "Nah, I'm saving it." "For blackmail?" one girl joked. "For entertainment," Mason replied. The table erupted with laughter. Across the cafeteria, a shy freshman named Eli carried his tray carefully between tables. His hand shook slightly. New school, new city, new life, and already he regretted coming here. He accidentally bumped into the edge of Mason's chair. A tiny splash of juice landed on Mason's sleeve. The cafeteria went silent. Eli froze. "I'm sorry," he stammered quickly. Mason slowly looked at the stain. Then at Eli. The expression on his face changed instantly. Cold, dangerous. "You blind?" Mason asked quietly. "No, I didn't mean..." Before Eli could finish, Mason slapped the tray out of his hands. Food exploded across the floor. Laughter echoed around the cafeteria. Eli stood there humiliated while spaghetti sauce dripped down his hoodie. Nobody helped him. Nobody ever helped. Except one person. The woman in the gray cardigan walked over calmly. She handed Eli a napkin. "You okay?" she asked gently. Eli nodded, even though his eyes looked watery. "Go get another lunch," she said. "But I don't have enough money left on my account." The woman smiled softly. "I'll handle it." She reached into her pocket and gave him cash. Real cash. Not a lunch voucher. Not a pity token. Enough for a full meal. Eli looked shocked. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Mason watched the interaction with amusement. "Ah," he mocked loudly. "Looks like Grandma adopted a stray." His table burst into laughter again, but the woman ignored him completely. That irritated Mason more than insults ever could. He was used to reactions. Fear, anger, crying, teachers threatening detention. But indifference? That drove him insane. The woman quietly sat at a nearby table alone and began eating her lunch. Simple rice, vegetables, tea, nothing fancy. Mason leaned back in his chair, staring at her. "Who even is she?" Tyler whispered. "No clue," Mason replied. "She walks like she owns the place." One of the girls laughed. "Maybe she thinks she's a principal." Mason smirked. Then an idea appeared in his head. A terrible one. The kind that usually earned him online attention. He pulled out his phone, opened the camera, and started recording. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced dramatically, "today we observe the rare cafeteria Karen in her natural habitat." His friends laughed immediately. The woman kept eating peacefully. Mason stood up slowly. Every student nearby watched carefully. Some looked nervous, others excited. Because when Mason stood up with that grin, something bad always happened. He walked toward the woman's table while recording. "Excuse me," he said mockingly. The woman looked up calmly. "Yes." You're sitting in our section. There's no assigned seating here, she replied politely. A few students exchanged nervous glances. Nobody spoke to Mason that way. Not rudely, not fearfully, just calmly. Mason chuckled. Actually, there is now. Still, the woman didn't react emotionally. She simply took another sip of tea, and that made Mason furious. You deaf or something? He snapped. No, she answered quietly. I just don't believe bullying deserves attention. The cafeteria froze. Mason's smile disappeared instantly. Tyler whispered, Yo. But Mason's pride had already taken over. What did you say? The woman set down her cup carefully. I said bullying thrives when people reward it with fear. Even students recording secretly from nearby tables stopped breathing. Nobody talked to Mason like this. Nobody. Mason leaned closer. You think you're brave? I think you're angry, the woman replied. And I think angry people often hurt others because they're hurting themselves. The entire cafeteria went dead silent. For 1 second, Mason almost looked shaken, as if her words hit somewhere deeper than expected. But then his friend started snickering behind him, and embarrassment turned into rage. Fast, without warning, Mason kicked the leg of her table violently. The plate flew into the air. Food crashed across the floor. Tea splashed onto nearby chairs. Students gasped. One girl screamed quietly, and Mason laughed. Oh no, he mocked. Guess gravity's a bully too. His friends exploded with laughter. Phones recorded from every angle. Someone whispered, He's done this time. But the woman didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't panic. She simply looked down at the ruined meal, then slowly stood up. Calm, controlled, terrifyingly calm. And that's when Vice Principal Harris entered the cafeteria. He took one look at the mess, then at Mason, then at the woman standing beside the overturned table. His face turned pale instantly, absolutely pale. The cafeteria noticed immediately. Students stopped whispering. Even Mason looked confused. Harris, Mason said with a smirk. Perfect timing. Cafeteria accident. Vice Principal Harris ignored him completely. Instead, he looked directly at the woman and said something that changed the entire room forever. Ma'am, his voice trembled slightly. Welcome to Westridge Academy. The cafeteria became so quiet that students could hear trays clattering in the kitchen. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed normally. Mason stared at Vice Principal Harris in confusion. Wait, Tyler whispered. Did he just call her ma'am? Vice Principal Harris walked quickly toward the woman. I deeply apologize for this behavior, he said nervously. The woman nodded once. It's quite all right. No, it absolutely isn't. His eyes shifted toward Mason, and for the first time in years, Mason looked uncertain. Hold on, Mason said slowly. Who exactly is she? Vice Principal Harris swallowed hard, then answered loudly enough for the entire cafeteria to hear. This is Dr. Evelyn Carter. He paused. The new headmistress of Westridge Academy. The cafeteria exploded into whispers. Phones lowered instantly. Students looked stunned. One girl actually dropped her drink. No way. That's the new headmistress? Mason's finished. Tyler stepped backward immediately like he no longer knew Mason. But Mason forced out a laugh. A headmistress? He scoffed. She was eating alone in the cafeteria. Dr. Carter calmly picked up her fallen teacup. Yes, she replied. I like observing schools before introducing myself. Those words hit harder than yelling ever could. Observing schools, meaning she had seen everything. The bullying, the fear, the silence, the teachers pretending not to notice. And now, everyone realized something horrifying. Mason had attacked a headmistress on her very first day. While multiple students were recording, Vice Principal Harris looked ready to faint. Sir, Dr. Carter said gently, please ask the students to return to lunch. But I'll handle this. Her calmness somehow made the situation even scarier. Mason crossed his arms. Look, it was a joke. No response. Seriously, everyone's acting dramatic. Still no response. Then Dr. Carter asked something unexpected. Why did you do it? Mason blinked. What? You heard me? Her voice stayed soft. Why humiliate people? The question irritated him immediately. Because I can. A few students looked uncomfortable hearing that out loud. Dr. Carter studied his face carefully. No, she said quietly. That's not the real reason. Mason smirked again. You gonna psychoanalyze me now? Maybe. His friends laughed nervously, but the laughter sounded weaker now, less confident, because something about Dr. Carter felt different. She wasn't afraid. At all. Most adults either yelled at Mason or avoided him, but she watched him like she already understood him, and that unsettled him deeply. Vice Principal Harris cleared his throat. Mr. Reed, you need to come to us immediately. Mason rolled his eyes. Whatever. But before he could leave, a voice shouted from the back of the cafeteria. Wait! Everyone turned. A sophomore girl named Lily stood near the entrance holding her phone high. Her hand shook slightly. I recorded everything. The cafeteria erupted again. Mason's expression darkened instantly. Delete it, he snapped. Lily hesitated. No. That single word shocked the room, because Lily never stood up to anyone, especially Mason. You serious right now? Mason growled. Dr. Carter stepped between them smoothly. That video belongs to her, she said calmly. Mason laughed coldly. You think a video matters? But then another student raised a phone. I recorded it too. Then another. And me. And me. One by one, students slowly lifted their phones. Different angles, different recordings, different evidence. For years, students had secretly filmed Mason bullying others, but nobody ever dared share the clips. Fear kept everyone silent. Until now, Mason suddenly realized something terrifying. This wasn't just one video. It was dozens, maybe hundreds. Dr. Carter looked around the cafeteria. Interesting, she said softly. What's interesting? Mason snapped. That students documented abuse instead of reporting it. Nobody answered, because she was right. The school had become so broken that students trusted cameras more than adults. Dr. Carter turned toward Vice Principal Harris. How long has this behavior been happening? Harris looked trapped. Ma'am, we've had some disciplinary concerns, but... How long? His face turned red. Years. The word hit the cafeteria like thunder. Years. Everyone knew it was true. Mason grinned again suddenly, almost arrogantly. See? He spread his arms proudly. Nobody stopped me. And there it was. The ugliest truth in the room. Not confidence. Not bravery. Just years of unchecked behavior. Dr. Carter nodded slowly. You're right. Mason blinked. I am. Yes. She stepped closer. Adults failed the school. The cafeteria fell silent again. Teachers ignored cruelty. Administrators avoided conflict. Students learned fear. Her eyes swept across the room. And bullies learned power. Nobody could look away from her. Even Mason stayed quiet now. Then Dr. Carter surprised everyone again. She pulled out her own phone, tapped the screen once, and played a video. The cafeteria audio echoed softly. Mason's voice blasted through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, today we observe the rare cafeteria Karen. Students froze. Mason's face lost color. How did you... Dr. Carter looked at him steadily. You assumed you were the only one recording. The realization hit him like a truck. Her silver watch. It wasn't just a watch. It was a tiny camera. Several students gasped loudly. Vice Principal Harris looked stunned too. Dr. Carter paused the video exactly at the moment Mason kicked the table. Clear angle, clear sound, clear intent. No excuses. Mason's confidence cracked for the first time. You film me? I document behavior, she answered calmly. That's legal. In this situation? Yes. Tyler slowly backed away from Mason again. The two girls at his table refused to even look at him now. Suddenly Mason stood alone. Completely alone. Dr. Carter slipped the phone back into her pocket. Then she said something nobody expected. You remind me of someone. Mason frowned. Who? My younger brother. That answer stunned the room. He bullied people too, she continued quietly. Thought cruelty made him powerful. For the first time, genuine emotion appeared in her eyes. But underneath that anger, she paused briefly. He was drowning. Mason scoffed loudly. Spare me the emotional speech. But his voice sounded weaker now, less certain. Dr. Carter studied him carefully. You wear arrogance like armor. That supposed means something? It means pain often disguises itself as dominance. Mason clenched his jaw. Students exchanged confused looks. Why wasn't she screaming at him? Why wasn't she threatening expulsion immediately? Then Dr. Carter asked another unexpected question. What happened to your hand? Mason instinctively pulled his sleeve lower. Too late. She had already seen the bruises near his wrist. Tiny bruises. Old ones. The cafeteria noticed too. Mason's expression hardened instantly. Mind your business. But Dr. Carter's eyes changed slightly, as if pieces of a puzzle were suddenly connecting. Before she could respond, the cafeteria doors burst open. A man in an expensive suit stormed inside angrily. Mason! Every student recognized him instantly. Richard Reed, Mason's father, one of the wealthiest donors connected to the school, and one of the most feared men in town. His sharp eyes locked onto the mess instantly. What nonsense is this? Vice Principal Harris straightened nervously. Mr. Reed. I got 3 phone calls in 10 minutes. His gaze shifted toward Dr. Carter. And who are you? The cafeteria held its breath. But Dr. Carter remained perfectly calm. I'm the new headmistress. For the first time, Richard Reed looked surprised, then annoyed. Well, he said coldly, I hope you're not planning to exaggerate some childish cafeteria incident. Students stared in disbelief. Childish incident? He hadn't even asked what happened. Dr. Carter looked at him carefully, then at Mason, then back at him again, and suddenly, everything about Mason started making terrifying sense. The bruises, the anger, the need for control, the explosive reactions. Dr. Carter's expression became unreadable. But deep inside, she realized the story was far darker than a school bully humiliating people. Because sometimes, bullies are created long before they ever enter a classroom. Richard Reed walked across the cafeteria like he owned the building. And in many ways, he believed he did. Teachers moved aside instantly. Students lowered their eyes. Even Vice Principal Harris looked nervous, standing near him. Richard adjusted the cuff of his expensive suit and stared coldly at the overturned food on the floor. All this drama over a tray? He said sharply. Mason smirked slightly beside him. The familiar confidence started returning to his face. His father was here now, and whenever Richard Reed appeared, problems usually disappeared, especially for Mason. I'll make a donation for the damages, Richard added dismissively. Several students looked disgusted. Dr. Carter remained calm. This situation isn't about money. Richard gave a thin smile. In my experience, everything is. The cafeteria fell silent again. Dr. Carter stepped closer slowly. No, she replied quietly. Some things cost far more. Richard's expression hardened. What exactly are you implying? Instead of answering immediately, Dr. Carter turned toward the students. Everyone who recorded today's incident, she announced clearly, you may send your videos directly to my office. Mason's face changed instantly. Richard looked furious. That won't be necessary, he snapped. It already is. The tension in the cafeteria became unbearable. Students could practically feel the power struggle happening in front of them. For years, Richard Reed controlled Westridge Academy through donations and influence. Teachers feared upsetting him. Administrators protected his son. And students suffered quietly. But Dr. Carter didn't seem impressed by any of it. Richard folded his arms. My son made a mistake. Dr. Carter nodded once. Yes, a childish mistake. No, she corrected softly. A character-revealing one. The room went silent. Mason clenched his fists. Richard stepped closer. Careful, he warned. But Dr. Carter didn't move, didn't blink, didn't back down. You know, she said calmly, I reviewed Westbridge's records before arriving. Vice Principal Harris suddenly looked terrified. Dr. Carter continued. Bullying complaints disappeared mysteriously. Detentions were erased. Suspensions were reversed. Her eyes locked onto Richard. And somehow, your son avoided consequences every single time. Students exchanged shocked glances. So it was true. People had suspected favoritism for years. But hearing it spoken aloud felt unreal. Richard forced a laugh. You're accusing me of corruption? I'm observing patterns. The cafeteria felt electric now. Phones secretly recorded again. Not because students wanted entertainment anymore. Because history was happening. Richard's smile disappeared completely. You should think very carefully before making enemies in this town. Vice Principal Harris nearly stopped breathing after hearing that. But Dr. Carter simply smiled faintly. I already did. Then she reached into her pocket again and pulled out a thin black folder. Do you recognize these? Richard frowned. What is that? Financial reports. His expression shifted instantly. Tiny change, but enough. Dr. Carter noticed. So, did Mason. These records, she continued, show anonymous donations entering school accounts before disciplinary cases involving your son disappeared. Vice Principal Harris looked like he might collapse. Richard's jaw tightened. That's absurd. Is it? Dr. Carter calmly opened the folder. There's more. She removed several printed screenshots. Messages, emails, bank transfers. Students leaned forward trying to see. Mason suddenly looked confused. Dad? Richard ignored him. You invaded private financial records? No, Dr. Carter replied. The Board of Education invited me to investigate them. That sentence hit like an explosion. Investigate, not manage, not improve. Investigate. The new headmistress hadn't been hired normally. She had been sent. The cafeteria erupted into whispers. Oh my God! That's why she came secretly. She was testing the school. Vice Principal Harris looked physically ill now. Richard stepped closer aggressively. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Dr. Carter's expression darkened slightly. No. She looked directly into his eyes. I think I finally do. For the first time all day, Mason looked scared. Not angry. Not embarrassed. Scared. Because his father suddenly seemed nervous too. And Mason had never seen that before. Then Dr. Carter turned toward him. Mason, he looked at her cautiously. I want you to answer honestly. He stayed silent. When was the last time someone offended you? The question stunned everyone, including Mason himself. Richard snapped immediately. This conversation is over. But Dr. Carter ignored him. Mason, the boy's confidence started cracking visibly. His breathing changed. His jaw tightened. And suddenly the entire cafeteria realized something horrifying. Nobody had ever asked Mason if he was okay. Not once. Because everyone only saw the monster he became, not whatever created him. Richard grabbed Mason's shoulder roughly. We're leaving. Mason flinched slightly. Tiny movement. Easy to miss. But Dr. Carter saw it immediately. So did several students nearby. And suddenly the bruises on Mason's wrist felt much more sinister. Dr. Carter's voice became softer. You don't have to protect him. Richard exploded instantly. Enough. His shout echoed through the cafeteria. Students jumped. Even teachers froze. Richard's face turned red with fury. You think because you have a title you can interfere with my family? Dr. Carter didn't react emotionally. I think hurting people creates more hurt people. That boy has everything. Richard pointed angrily at Mason. Money, cars, status, opportunity. His voice rose louder. And this is how he repays me? Embarrassing me publicly? Mason stared at the floor, silently. Dr. Carter watched carefully. Then she said the sentence that shattered everything. You speak about him like property. Silence. Dead silence. Richard looked stunned. Mason slowly lifted his head, and for the first time all day, there was no arrogance left in his eyes. Only exhaustion. Years of it. Richard laughed coldly. You psychologists always think you understand people. I understand fear, Dr. Carter replied. and your son lives with it every day. The cafeteria became completely motionless. Mason's breathing became shaky. "Stop talking," he muttered quietly. But Dr. Carter continued gently. Bullies often learn one lesson early. Her eyes stayed on Mason. "The strongest person in the room survives." Students listened carefully now. No laughter, no phones, just silence. "So they imitate power," she said. "They humiliate others before others can humiliate them." Mason's eyes became watery instantly. He looked furious about it, ashamed, trapped. Richard grabbed his arm harder. "We are leaving. Now." But Mason suddenly pulled away. Hard. The movement shocked everyone. Richard stared at him in disbelief. "Mason?" And then it happened. The moment nobody expected. Mason looked around the cafeteria slowly. At the students he bullied. At the teachers who ignored it. At the friends already distancing themselves from him. Then finally, at the ruined plate on the floor. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "I didn't even know why I did it anymore." The room stayed silent. Dr. Carter stepped closer carefully. Mason laughed bitterly. "Every day somebody at home gets angry." He swallowed hard. "So I come here angry too." Richard's face darkened instantly. "You ungrateful little—" "Enough!" The voice thundered across the cafeteria. But it wasn't Richard. It was Vice Principal Harris. Everyone froze. Even Dr. Carter looked surprised. Harris stepped forward shaking. Years of fear finally breaking apart inside him. "I stayed silent too long." His voice cracked. "I let students suffer because I was afraid of losing my job." Students stared at him, some angrily, some emotionally. Harris looked at Mason painfully. "And I failed you too." Mason looked stunned. Dr. Carter slowly nodded. This school needed accountability. Then she looked around the cafeteria one final time. "And today—" Her eyes settled on the dozens of phones still recording. It finally got witness. Hours later, the video spread across social media, but not for the reason people expected. The internet didn't focus on the kick plate, or the rich bully, or even the public confrontation. They focused on one haunting moment. A teenage boy standing in a silent cafeteria saying, "I come here angry too." And overnight, Westbridge Academy stopped being known as a school where bullying happened. It became known as a school where silence finally ended.